I'm trying to share my screen now.
Okay.
All right, do you all see a PowerPoint? Awesome. Well, I am Kathleen Booth, and I'm going to talk some about the glass lamps made by the Jefferson Glass Company. Once I get all of my stuff in the right screen so I can forward. There we go. So I'll start with a little bit of an introduction of myself and what we're going to talk about, the company, and then we'll get into the lamps, which roughly split into two sort of categories of colonial inspired and the pancake lamps. So this is the lamp that started it all for me. I found it at a glass show in the mid 1990s, somewhere in the 90s. And I thought it was pretty neat. And I flipped it over, and there was not one but two labels on it. My mother jokes that I collect labels with glass attached. She's not really wrong. And this one not only had the Jefferson label on it, but it had the jewelry shop as well. And I thought that was really neat. So it came home with me. And then over the next 20-ish years or so, I put together this. This display was at the National Depression Glass Association convention in Kokomo, Indiana in 2012. And this is a pretty good overview of what we're going to talk about today, plus a few that I've added since then. So Jefferson Glass Company was actually started in Steubenville, Ohio in 1900. Most histories start when they moved to Folensville, West Virginia in 1907. That sounds like a really long distance, but it's actually about 7 miles. They just hopped the state line. This was not a small company. In 1916, they were reported as having 350 employees, and they shipped international. Denmark, Switzerland, Sweden, England, and Canada were major markets for them. They had sales reps over there, etc. Uh, in the second factories, they did start one in Canada in 1912 as a partner with, I think it was Diamond at the time that became Dominion. Uh, Dominion took it pretty much over by 1914 and definitely by 1916. The Jefferson in the US lost all control of the one in Canada. In 1915, they either started or restarted a second factory in Ohio, and that was part of where they were going to be servicing their Canadian customers because they no longer controlled the one in Canada, which continued to use the Jefferson name until it closed in 1925. Fortunately, it didn't seem to make any of the stuff we're going to be talking about, so there's no confusion there. In 1923, it merged with the Jefferson Company. They had been closely associated anyway. Jefferson Glass Company made glass, and Jefferson Company made metal lamp bases and shade holders and things like that. So they had a close business relationship, but they merged in 1923. In 1933, they declared bankruptcy. They'd been on their way out for probably a couple of years since they quit going to some of the lamp markets. The factory was sold at sale to a group of Pittsburghers, and over the next 5 to 6 years, there were rumors of it being restarted, but I don't think it ever did. So, as I said, a very brief history of the company. It was around for about 33 years. So, what did they make during that time? Well, they did make tableware. If you want to know more, you can go check out the website at the bottom. I know nothing about their tableware, and this is the entirety I'm going to mention. It existed. They made a lot of stuff related to lighting. So automobile lenses and stage lenses. They always did lenses, but it wasn't until the start of World War I where somebody at the factory said, this looks like it's going to actually be a market. They invested in the means to make more and better and a variety of lenses, and it paid off with military contracts in World War I, automobile contracts after that. The stop beacon is one of my favorite pieces because it's just cool. The stage lenses come in a variety of sizes and colors, and they did also make railroad glass along this line as well. In 1927, what is believed, according to a trade journal at the time, to be the first glass that was delivered via airplane was a set of automobile lenses shipped from Jefferson off to Toledo because they were a high grade automobiles that were just waiting for their final decoration to be able to be delivered. So that was believed to be the first delivery by plane, which I thought was pretty neat. They also made what they called illuminating glassware, which pretty well fell into two categories prior to the mid 20s. One of those would be shades and globes. If you notice here, none of these would be chimneys. They all hook into fixtures where they would be clamped or screws to hold them. And they made a wide variety. They had quite a few of a milky white glass style. So the Lucio, the Moonstone, I'm holding in the middle there a advertising paperweight. I don't have a shade of that. These are sort of outside my interest, but if they're cheap enough and have the Jefferson mark on them, I will bring them home. I think we all know how scope creeps a little bit. And the different white glass is partially they get better over time, so it's better quality, and also because it depends on what the illumination source was. So some of them were designed for gas and some of them were designed for electrical. They emphasized commercial, or at least they were focused on it. Uh, they advertised for schools. They had shades for hospitals that had no grooves, nothing that would keep the dust. So it was easy to clean. For retail establishments or office, and that was a lot of what they did. Although you can see on the screen that there's also quite a bit that's would be at home and home. The other part of illumination glassware to them were reverse painted shades. So think Handel, think Pittsburgh. They're large, they're ornate, they're fancy, they're expensive. These were over $30 in 1925. These were, let's see, I wrote down they're about 26 inches tall and 16 inches wide. And the shipping carton contained one of them and weighed 26 pounds. They also came out with smaller ones in 1925. They called them portable lamps. They would be a lot easier to move around, being only about 15 inches tall and 8 inches wide, but they still had fancy shades. These were significantly lighter and cheaper, but they were still $10. These were not cheap lamps at the time. So I know you told us we were going to talk about glass. We haven't talked about any glass lamps yet. Exactly when they started is unclear. Up through 1925, they advertised heavily in the Jobbers trade journal, and they never mentioned glass bases. So either they were selling them through a different route or they didn't really start till then. But there is one catalog page that is in a book called Decorative Lamps of the 1950s. And they have a dated 1926, according to their caption, Jefferson Glass Company page. This is the earliest reference to the bottom part of the lamp being glass. I have to admit, I have not seen most of these. These are not common. These are large, so they are also in the 2-foot range, a little bit shorter with the lamp shades. We'll talk about the one that has the glass shades in a little bit, but this is what I have along these sizes. So the one on the right, which is the yellow one, I believe the urn part is shown in that catalog. That base is a slug of glass. It is not falling over unless you really, really work at it. The one on the left is a similar size, so it's about 2 feet tall when you put the harp on the top. And so I put it in sort of the same category of these large table lamps. It has a nice cardinal etched on it, and this is the first of the Jefferson pink that we're going to see. So those are sort of the older-ish lamps, some of the early ones. Then they switched over, however, in 1927 was the launch of their early American-inspired line. And we start seeing these. These are much smaller. So the largest one is 15 inches tall, and they're much narrower. I've also sometimes called them a base font because they have a glass base and a glass font, and then shades of either fabric or parchment or glass. All of them were available, but they describe them as having a font, which is where you would put the oil or the kerosene, were it not an electric lamp. They continue to announce these in 1928 and 1929. We see more of them coming into the line. At that point, I no longer can access the trade journals, so I don't know what they do after that. but I assume they continue to expand it. So with that, let's start looking at these lamps. So those are actually what's in that advertisement where they launched the line. It's the Venetian swirl is the pattern. And interestingly, the font has a wide and a narrow swirl, while the shade has just a single width. The single width is more common. I think they simplified it down. The white one on the right, which is a clear frosted, it does have the pattern. They have just frosted it so heavy that you can barely see it. So there is an octagonal foot, which is the most common foot for these lamps. And then there's the font, what they're mimicking there, and the shade. And then there's a fourth piece that they don't mention in the ads, which is the spool. If you look on the outside two, they are round. And if you look on the middle two, they're octagonal. And those are pretty well interchangeable. You will find most of the fonts with either one. Uh, I don't know why they put sometimes one and sometimes the other, but they did. You can find them all. These are their three opaque. So the round font is the most common one that you will find, and you will find it with the widest variety of decorations or not. So here they're plain. These are the three opaque colors. The green is jade. The black, I believe, is nylite. If it isn't, I don't know what nylite is. And then we have the sort of pink that is, they called it that French term. They parentheticaled it to ivory. So apparently I'm not the only one who looked at that and said, what on earth color is that? If you like it, it's an ivory with a hint of pink. If you don't, it's a washed out pink. Your choice. That is the most common color. I think you can get every single shape in that color. It is the most heavily advertised of their colors. Um, you can't necessarily get every pattern. I don't know that they did any of the swirl in that, but every shape comes in that color. You can also tell here that the ones on the left, the two on the left, would have come with parchment or fabric shades. The one on the right obviously came with a glass shade, and it has the chimney holder. So whether it has a chimney holder or not would have been original depending on the type of thing. In 1930, which is after Depression starts to hit, prices come down and they were probably struggling. These with a fabric shade were $5, which is a lot less than the 30 that they were selling lamps for in 1925. These came with a cutting. The round ones generally come with the grape cutting. I think this is their C305 cutting, but I'm looking at a 1930 shade catalog to try and figure out what that is, and all the grape cuttings kind of look the same to me, honestly. They did come with the two colors. So here you see a ruby and a clear, and previously we had the ivory and the black. That is advertised as a way you can get them. I don't think people generally did, because you usually find these as a single color. So either the jewelry stores are like, we're not dealing with that, or people just wanted single colors. That's the most common way to find these. The red and the blue are not common. They exist, but they're really not that common of colors. And the black is not common in this early American sort of base font style, though you obviously can find it. These also came etched in a couple different patterns. So this one is a swirl. I don't have a lot to say about it. It's by far the least common of the two etches that this came in. The other one is probably the better known bird etch. If you think of Jefferson, a lot of people think of this particular etch. I will note one more thing on color. The two different ambers you've seen there is not a trick of photography. Their amber varies considerably. These also are interesting in that the etch itself was inconsistent. The opaque ones are a standard etching usually, in that the design is etched into the glass. How deep it is varies quite a bit. So the green one you can barely see because it's not a very deep etch. And the pink one is a deeper etch, so it's easier to see. It's nice that the green shade they highlighted. That is, you see that, but not all the time. And then on the ambers for the clear, they frosted the background. On the opaques, you will sometimes find it as a reverse etch, where they have eaten away the background and the design is forwards. So you can find it both ways, which strikes me as weird. But their etches are just not consistent. So moving on, we finally get to a different font. This one to me is a more traditional kerosene style. This did not come, as far as I know, with an added decoration. So it came in the plain, and it came in here you have a Venetian swirl shade, and that is an original Jefferson shade. Yes, I know the font's upside down. I get tired of trying to take my lamps apart and put them back together properly, so I tend to leave them. And I know that's an original shade for a variety of reasons, one of which is here it is on the swirled font. So when the Venetian swirl or a lot of the decorations are done, you'll notice they are decorated on the font and they're decorated on the shade. The base and the foot and the spool are not. So the swirl does not appear on the foot or the spool. Both of these shades are original. The one on the left, interestingly, actually appears in the 1915 catalog. They just extended the end, flipped it 180 degrees, and now instead of being something that clamps onto a fixture, it goes as a chimney, which is kind of smart, honestly. It's a little bit thicker than most shades, and I think that's because it was originally a different style. I do want to point out here that there are ruffles at the top of the shade because I will say something later, and I do not want anyone walking away from this saying Jefferson did not make ruffled shades. They absolutely did, and here is one of them. So as we move along, these I know were really heavily launched in 1928. I call them a pair because they didn't really name their styles. They gave them numbers, but every possible variation was a different number, which makes it hard to track. These came with a rose cutting. As far as I know, they're the only ones that had a rose cutting, and they only came if they were cut with a rose. They also came in the Venetian swirl, and then as you can see on the left, they came undecorated. These would have had a matching cut shade. And actually the grapes probably have a matching cut shade too. I've just never found one. Um, so these are the bulbous shades. So it's the same shade as the Venetian swirl we saw in the previous one. Here it's a 3-arm, similar to, yes, you could get it in multiple colors. Yes, you could get some of these with multiple arms. They don't seem to have been that popular. You will by far find single sockets more than anything else. This one also has a different base. Either somebody took a lot of artistic imagination with the octagonal base standard ones, or there's another base out there that I've never seen, and I think it's that. Usually you will find these with the standard octagonal foot. Uh, they also showed it with the octagonal foot and a different shade. So it's entirely reasonable these came with different shades. I think these are kind of cool. They're an interesting shape. So this is the first non-octagonal foot I'm showing you. These have a different spool. The spool always comes with this base. This base always comes with the spool. So these three pieces come together or not at all. They did come in different variants. So you can find the base with just the spools. So the first spool lamp, that's probably the shade that came with it. I think the one we saw, the pink one earlier, would also work well on these. You could also get it as just the base and the spool, and it goes up to 2 arms. So we've given up on the font here. So they clearly were not beholden to their design style. They were willing to take the pieces and make other things. As a note, Crescent Glassworks was in the same county, and they put out a lamp pieces catalog sometime after Jefferson closed. It's not dated, where they just had, here's a whole bunch of pieces of glass. You can buy them from us and then assemble your own lamps with hardware and sockets that you bought somewhere else. They have all 3 of these pieces in that catalog. They have some other things that are less distinctive, like everybody has that round font and a round ball is not distinctive. These 3 pieces are pretty distinctive. I'm pretty sure that Crescent got the molds when Jefferson closed. These are different. These are small. So the previous one was not the tallest of these, and these are even shorter. These have a small round base. The octagonal base would be oversized, to say the least, but they do use the normal round spool on the left 3. The right 2 have a different base and have a spool that isn't used anywhere else. The other interesting thing is I said that we would cycle back to the glass shades in that catalog. This font and this shade are what's in that catalog, but the difference in size is considerable. So that one would have been 21-ish inches tall. These are maybe a foot and probably a little shorter. So they have taken the top two pieces and instead of putting it on a large base with lots of metal in between, they've shrunk it down. I don't know exactly when these started. I think it's a good idea. I will warn you, if you find these, be careful. The ones on the left have a notch for the cord that doesn't really fit modern cords. It only barely fit the old cords, and they like to fall over. So be careful if you're setting them up. The ones on the right are much nicer. They have an easier time to getting the cords out. So these are something else that people think of when they think of Jefferson. They're called in the if you search on eBay, they're stick lamps or they're spool lamps. They have completely gotten rid of the font. These were sold as vanity lamps. They would not have had glass shades. These would have had parchment shades. Um, and here we see the first of the painting. So that's another decorating style that is more common in the squattier lamps, but it shows up here as well. Came in a variety of colors. And here's a point where I'm gonna give you some hints here and there of how to tell something isn't Jefferson, more than how to tell things are. Sorry about that, but at least one way is better than neither. You can tell from these lamps that obviously the spool and the base are separate pieces because they have put a piece of metal in between. There are other companies that have similar styles of having an octagonal or otherwise base and a spool that are one piece. If it is one piece of glass, it's not Jefferson. So the black one there is Globe Specialty. It's an octagonal base with a thing on top of it. It has a label on the bottom, so I have it. The other one, obviously the round base doesn't look much like Jefferson, but the spool kind of does, except that it's attached as one piece. So you find them linked together as one mold, it's not Jefferson. The stick lamps also came with round tops instead of the spools. That's the Venetian swirl again on the pink one. These are a couple other stick lamps that are around. The one on the left is a larger round base than we saw earlier. It has little feet too, which is nice. I think that is the original metal because it's the same as the one on the green lamp and a couple other lamps I have seen. The green one is interesting because Jefferson wasn't quite so big on doing molded designs. They usually did added, be that cut or etched or painted or whatever. So that's a little unusual. This one also appears in the Crescent catalog. Uh, I actually think there might be a font around that matches that one, but I have not found it. The one on the right is not really normal, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One, that white base is the color of their moonstone, so it is one of their shade colors from before. This is the only piece I've seen that has that white, so I don't think using their shades as bases was particularly popular. I also want to note that this is the normal octagonal base, and while it kind of looks like it just has a thing stacked on top of that white one, they are completely different molds because the green one you can reach your hand up inside. There's no piece of glass across. So that is a completely different mold on that one. So I think that people just are like, we don't really like the white bases because they are not. That's the only one I've seen of that. Just to wrap up sort of the base font section, there's a couple others. The round one with the birds, that is a reverse etch, so the background is etched away. The base that's on it is the same as was on the large urn we saw earlier, the yellow one. So I think it's pretty neat. I have also seen that with jade, with that setup with a jade base. The square one, if you are shipping a lamp, please wrap it in more than 2 pieces of newspaper, put it in a sturdy box, and if you insist on doing neither of this, do not blame the post office when it shows up in pieces. But fortunately, they were big enough pieces I could glue back together. That stair step base, you will see, that is one of their other bases. It's not nearly as common as the ones we've looked at already, but it does exist. It more often comes with this spool. I have this in here because that stair step pool, which is not unique to Jefferson, other companies did that, especially Fenton. but it shows up with that square base more often. Obviously, they're kind of complementary. The ruborhombic-like base, I think this was a sample based on the very unique label on the bottom. It's a neat piece, but I don't know how widespread it was made. Uh, it's in here mostly because it came with the spool, but also because it's neat. It's one of my favorite pieces. Um, and then there's this, which kind of sits in between, and then it sort of has a base and it has a font, but it also kind of looks like a squashed pancake lamp to me. We'll get back to the pattern that's on this one in a little bit. I will also just give a highlight here that Fenton had this piece too. So Fenton and Jefferson overlapped heavily on some of their glass or on some of their lamps, and this one appears in the Fenton catalog. But this one is labeled and is Jefferson's ivory. So I'm fairly confident in my allocation of it. One more thing that sort of sits in the middle, if I was doing early American lamps, even if I was claiming to be kerosene, this would totally fit genre-wise in. These are more candle lamp style. They come generally with a glass shade. It would be weird to have them with a parchment. There's a daisy pattern there, and then here is another one of the enamels. They're cute, they're adorable, and they're certainly early American inspired. And that leads us over into the pancake lamps, which at least one trade journal referred to as squat lamps. And I love the idea of some high-class lady walking into a high-class jewelry store and being, I would like a squat lamp. I don't know that they actually sold them that way outside of the trades. So this is the pattern I said we get back to that is on the lamp I said was also in the Fenton catalog. These are actually variants of the same. So if you look at the black one and think of that pattern as going counterclockwise, on the pink one, it goes clockwise and has a cobblestone background. The amber one has the base matches the black and the shade matches the pink. I have seen a couple different cobblestone background shades. I don't know if it comes without it. I think it would probably show the light a little better. I don't think Jefferson made any pancake lamps that weren't decorated in some fashion. So while there are others, the base font combinations you can find, obviously plain. We saw several of them. I have never seen a pancake lamp that doesn't have some type of decoration on it. These are the most common. They were the most popular. That was a rose decoration. These are also the four colors that you're most likely to find Jefferson pancake lamps in. Obviously, we just saw an amber. They come in others, but these are the four most common, the three opaques. The black is pretty common in pancakes, even if it wasn't in the other style, and then a frosted rose. If these are made by Fenton, they called the pattern December Rose. I don't know for sure what Jefferson called it. And it is very hard to tell them apart. So a couple things I will note that apply to pancake lamps in general. As far as I can tell, Jefferson did not make this shade with a ruffle. That's based on what I've seen, what I own, and a 1930s shade catalog that does have a lot of these shades in it. Fenton did, but Fenton also made a ruffle made of smooth. Jefferson's do not have ridges on the base. If you run your hand around the base, it is smooth on top. And Jefferson, as far as I can tell, only made solid color bases. So I do not think that the coin optic, I think that's right phrase, or the ribbon are Jefferson. Even if they don't have ridges, I have seen no evidence that Jefferson made these bases in anything but solid colors of glass. So if it has a ruffled top of a matching decorated shade, because people will stick any shade on it that they feel like from time to time, but if it's a matching shade and it's ruffled, or there's ridges on the base, or it is a multicolor glass base, it's probably not Jefferson from what I know. Unfortunately, the reverse is not true. You can have a smooth top, no ridges, and a solid color base, and it could be Fenton or it could be Jefferson. I know mine are Jefferson because they're all marked. They also did these with etches. These are big flower etch. We'll zoom in a little closer on this. These, just like the others, vary in depth considerably. So the green one is not nearly as deeply etched, and it is a very smooth background, while the black ones are much rougher and much deeper. The shade has a matching pattern that is small flowers. I have heard people say that you can tell whether something's Jefferson or not by whether or not the etch goes all the way around to the base, to the feet. On my sample size of 3 here, they all look like this. But I will note the ones that go all the way to the feet are a different etch. They're actually a very small flower, so it's the same flower but smaller. I think those are probably Jefferson, but I can't prove it. I have one in Jefferson's ivory, and I have one that has a shade that would have a big flower that has a big flower on it. So I think they're Jefferson. I can't prove it. This is where a very small sample size isn't great. I have 3. That's not a lot. But I also find it interesting that everybody talks about does it go to the feet and nobody mentions that it's 2 different flowers in the 2 different etches. And then, so this is sort of the last here. We have just plain painting. It's just a gold paint. And here, this shade matches. So on the black pancakes, they usually came with a complementarily decorated clear shade, generally frosted, maybe etched. We also have the enamel. This matches the ones that were on the finger lamps earlier. And that is all I have. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I have lots of questions, and it's like, and I have to say, start off that for whatever reason, I've never really looked at glass lamps before, and I don't know why, because I mean, the way you've described it and everything, it's very fascinating that they did so much with them, and there's such a variety of them, and I think this is just fascinating. So now I'm going to
Mhm.
have to really look when I go out shopping sometime and see what I find. I will say that as with the unique shape of the pancake lamps, I don't seem to see those out. I mean, I think I would recognize that shape very quickly, and I don't see those as often as I see some of the others with the different shapes and styles. Is that a fair assumption?
Um, Now most of what I see is on eBay, where I'm specifically
Okay.
looking for it because I don't make glass shows very much since I am now fully employed and have a child. So the pancakes do show up there a fair amount.
Okay.
Um, I don't know they show up more or less than the others. They show up probably less than the others combined, but probably the pancake lamp, the with the rose pattern on it, the round font lamps, and then the stick lamps are the 3 most common.
Okay.
Um,
And you mentioned that they're Fenton, and was there a connection? Were they copying each other? Were they working together?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I find it hard to believe there's not some connection, be that Fenton bought molds when Jefferson ended, that the lamp that has the 3 swirls, I call it a snake lamp because it looks like 3
Right.
snakes, that is really distinct,
Hmm.
and they have the same pattern on it. So I would not be surprised if that was a mold change. The Fenton catalog I'm referring to, let me find it, is the reprint is in the Fenton Art Glass 1907 to 1939 second edition book by Whitmire. I think the first time I saw that book, I nearly threw it across the room because it had so many lamps in it that I recognized from Jefferson. When I went on my honeymoon, we actually stopped by the Fenton Museum when Fenton was still in business, and they had 2 pancake lamps on display. One of them was ruby and has very clear ridges, and the other one was a clear etch that is not a flower etch I recognize, but it had no ridges. And it was on loan from someone else, but I figure if Fenton put it in their own museum, probably they know what they made. So that's not a reliable way to tell the difference between the
Okay.
two. As for the roses, if they're not marked and the color is one that overlap between both companies, I have never figured out how to tell them apart, which is why mine all have labels because I got mad. And I decided I was not going to worry about it.
Right.
They also Fenton also used the round um, font. I have not seen them use the octagonal foot. They did have a slug, that square slug base. I assume you can tell those apart because Jefferson's actually says Jefferson carved in the glass, like it was in the mold. I assume Fenton's does not say Jefferson on the bottom. So that one shouldn't be too hard to tell apart.
I have a question. Do you find more kerosene lamps by Jefferson or about an equal amount with the electric
Um,
lamps? Or is there a difference?
I don't know that they made kerosene lamps. Like
Well,
as far as
what,
I can, as far as I can tell, they made shades
okay, so
early
just,
on, just the shades, and then they made this line of electric lamps that was inspired by colonial
oh,
kerosene lamps.
oh, okay, I'm
Um,
sorry, I
yeah,
misunderstood then.
that's probably
I'm
on me.
sorry.
So yeah, no, they're all of their electrics are inspired by, well, not all of this, the font ones that I was
Okay,
showing are inspired by colonial. They even mentioned French in one advertisement, an early American lamps. But they were
okay,
electric from the start.
okay.
And
So,
prior to that, I can't find any evidence. Like they started in 1900, they made shades for for gas fixtures, but I don't think they made kerosene lamps.
oh, okay. Okay, so the picture that's up on the screen right now,
Mhm,
okay, you have the sort of a pinkish and then the amber.
mhm.
Okay, so the amber one has the cord coming out of it,
Yep.
but the pink does not have the
Uh,
electric cord.
that's because
But they're both electrified.
they're both electrified.
Okay,
Yeah, they're
all
both
right, thank you.
electric.
Okay,
Um, I don't know that those fonts would actually work otherwise. So
okay,
that's more, I don't like the chords, and so I gleefully remove them or don't add them back
okay.
because
All
they're
right,
hard to
I would
pack.
do that too.
I actually, as I got all these out and retook all my pictures, we just finished our attic, and I'm moving my glass up there, and I unpacked everything, resorted it, and took all new pictures. And I was really tempted to just cut all the cords off, but I'm very much to the, oh well, these are the original cords. You might find information from them, and
Well, you have to keep them, but you don't have to display them.
yeah, I don't have to display them. But getting the if
Okay,
they have the chimney holder, getting them apart is actually, I have not found the trick for doing it. So,
okay. Right. Thank you.
any other questions? All right, I'm going to just stop the share.
Okay. I just want to say thank you. Like I said, this is not something that I am very familiar with at all, and to have it from a company that honestly, there's probably, I don't know, is there much information about Jefferson in general out there?
I think it's mostly in the early American pattern glass. They did Crystal and Chippendale,
Okay.
among other things. So there's not a lot in the Depression era about it. Like I mean, my parents are DG dealers, and I did not heard of Jefferson until I flipped that lamp over.
Okay.
Uh, but I think there is more detail and information on the like 1900 to 1920s tableware stuff. There's a fair amount up on the website I linked. I don't like that tableware. I don't care. I love the lamps, but I don't care about the clear tableware at all. Um, so yeah, they've got some catalogs and stuff up there, but Jefferson also in their catalogs were very separated. So this is the illumination catalog. This is the pamphlet
General.
on lenses.
Okay.
This is the tableware. And if anybody has the pamphlet that they were, send for our pamphlet on these new lamps, I would love to see it, but I have not found it yet. Just all these references to send for our pamphlet.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. Okay.
I think it's been amazing. This is Cynthia speaking, and I don't know how to get my camera turned on, but it's been an amazing program. I want to thank you very much.
I agree. The good thing about these glass groups is that even after collecting for decades, I can hear about companies that I didn't know existed, and now I can, like Dean said, I can start looking when I go out because I probably just have seen these lamps before, but I just was looking for some kind of depression glass and didn't pay any attention to them.
They're not incredibly common, but they're out there. They are out there. And other than the green ones, they're still somewhat reasonably priced. The green ones glow under UV light
Uh,
as a warning. None of the others do, but the green ones glow a lot.
well, like I said, thank you again. I knew from uh, chat about DG that you collected Jefferson lamps and you shared pictures there, and but I didn't. I'm just it's fascinating.
Thank you for letting me show off my collection because
Wow.
most of the people around me are like, yeah, it's a lamp. Yay.
No, it's more than just a lamp, trust me.
It's another box in the house.
So, yeah, thank you very much.
Very good. Very informative.
Yeah. Um, so if there are no more questions for Kathleen, do we want to talk about show and tell? Surely somebody has to have something they want to show off that they've gotten.
I've got something, but if I can't turn my camera on, I
Uh,
can't show you.
let me
Um,
see. Did you get a little message there?
yes, I'll
Okay, click
start
on
my
that.
video. Okay, let's do that.
There
I
we
am.
go.
Okay, thank you. All right. Well, I have this lamp. I use it all the time. I don't know what it is. Let me see if I can show you the whole thing. Um, that's the shade. Let's see. Let's do it this way. I'm turning it on. Let's see. How am I going to show you the whole thing? There it goes.
Oh, that's an Aladdin.
That's an Aladdin. Okay.
Mhm.
And it also, um,
You've got the finial up there.
yeah, the beautiful finial, and then the base also lights up.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's an Aladdin. Okay. And
I
then
don't know what number it is, but I know that's an Aladdin, and
okay,
depending on
it's a beautiful pattern on it. It was my mother's, and I just use it in my
and
bedroom
depending on
now.
if you've got a black light, if it glows, it was made before roughly 1941, 42, when they could
Okay.
still access uranium as coloring an agent, but
Okay, I do have a black light. I'll check it out.
okay.
Thank you, Dean. And then whoops. I lost you here. Let's see.
We can still see you.
Okay. I don't know where I went here. Okay, well, let me just show you this. It's just a shade. Is that showing up?
Only part of it.
Okay. It's a shade on a whole lamp. But it's a really old one. I don't know what I'm doing here. Return to meeting. Okay, there I go. Okay. See if I can show it or not. I turn it on and maybe then it'll. Let's see. I'm not. There it goes. It's not showing very well. It's let me do a little light that way.
No, but I can see it's got a pattern around the top part of it.
It's got a pattern around the top and it's got flowers painted on it, I believe.
Right.
It's a floor lamp that is old metal. I don't know. I'll send you a picture.
Okay.
Anyway, that's it for me.
I don't have a show, but I do have a tell. I was recently in Indiana at the Indiana Glass Museum, and I had, I come from California, so I told him, "Hey, I'm coming. Make sure, are you going to be open?" And when I got there, the guy that met me was the longtime manager and vice president of Indiana Glass, and he is very involved in the museum. And so he took me around the museum and told me some really, really interesting things. But one of my tell is that I had wondered for a long time about what happened to Indiana's depression glass molds. And he assured me that all of the depression glass era molds have been destroyed. Now, he did go into, showing me some patterns that, they sold the molds to, I think, and I have notes on it, but to different companies. But he told me that all of the depression glass era molds, like you would think, like Pyramid and Tea Room and all that, have had been destroyed.
Hmm.
What a shame.
Yeah, I mean, I think Heisey has the largest collection of handmade molds in the world, and they were able to purchase them at a big price tag, like $700,000. When they, maybe they bought them from Imperial, I don't know. But anyway, a lot of these glass companies, weren't that lucky. And depending on when they went out or, stopped production on some of the molds, maybe they went to the war effort as metal. I don't know. But I found that pretty interesting that he was pretty sure of that.
Hmm. Well, I'm not surprised. I mean, it's always been kind of mentioned that some did and some didn't. So, yeah, it's a shame that they've ended up and they're no longer available. But yeah, it's just a part of the history, I guess.
Just- I've got a cream and sugar I came up with. It's a tiffin set, and I believe it's the Queen Astrid etch on it.
Hmm.
And it also had the matching tray,
Okay.
which I haven't seen the tray in a long time. So I was surprised to find it.
I have thinking about Jefferson Glass. This isn't a new find, but I have some pieces made at the Canadian Jefferson Glass plant that you were referencing, Kathleen. So this is the late nugget pattern, it's called. Did it focus here? It was made supposedly from 1913 to 1925, so the entire time that that Canadian plant that was Jefferson and then was a Dominion Jefferson plant was open. I don't really collect EAPG, but this is kind of, I guess because it was made for so long, it's one of the ones that you find in my part of the country, which is like a newer part of the country, somewhat often. So I have a few pieces of it, but yeah, this is the late nugget, and that's the reason it's called late nugget is because there was a pattern called nugget, or was now called early nugget, that I think was made in the 1880s or 1890s at a number of Canadian plants, including I think the Nova Scotia glass plant. Don't know too much about that, but I've read a little bit.
Oh, I guess I can add a tell in here that I didn't mention. There's actually a lot of resources online now in the Internet Archive and the Corning Library and HathiTrust if you have a way of accessing that. There's a fair amount of old stuff that is becoming digitized and available. There's something about copyright that currently ends in 1929. Like you can get to 1929 and 1930 on are currently not available because of copyright. So I'm hoping over the next few years those will be available. But a lot of what I'm referencing, you can just download online. Google Books has some too. I would go there second. Usually the digitization quality is better. at Corning or Internet Archive or HathiTrust than it is at Google Books, but Google Books has some stuff nobody else does. But it's really cool to be able to get to some of these things.
Anybody have anything else? Okay. I'm going to say, Kathleen, again, thank you. A very
Yes.
fascinating presentation. Um, and I am certainly glad that you all joined us. And I hope you will continue to join us for future ones as they come up each month. So it's always nice to see faces I haven't seen in a while, Cynthia, Mariah. So it's good. So thank you. And
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate that.
well,
And we were both in South Africa or in Africa not long ago. So,
yeah.
all right.
So like I said, we'll do this again in July. We tentatively have a presentation for Stretch Glass set up for that time. But I've also, when I reached out to Kathleen, I reached out to several other people to try to encourage them to do a presentation. So the others have all responded positively. One very over enthusiastically said, "Oh, I may need 2 months." So we'll take whatever we can get. So all right. Again, thank you. It's always so nice to see everybody. So we'll look forward to it, and like I said, we'll see everybody hopefully again in July.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Take
Thank
care,
you.
everybody.
Kathleen.